welcome, Robert.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm glad to be here.
We're excited to have you as well. And I wanted to get started about a term that I hope that our audience members can gravitate towards, which is, intellectual property in terms of the IP definition. Can you share with our listeners how do you define intellectual property?
Well, the formal definition is typically, a work that's created by a creative work like a patent or a copyright or a manuscript or a design, blueprints, those kinds of, patentable and can be protected by law. And this could include even just the packaging of your product or other trade secrets, but I guess for purposes of protection and auditing and security, I would expand that definition a little more to include any confidential information in an organization that helps it maintain its competitive position. So this could include strategic plans, your internal strategic plans, marketing plans, price lists, your vendor lists, your customer and prospect mailing lists, even your company internal best practices. So if these were leaked or your competition got a hold of these things, it would give them an advantage. So they would know really what you're doing or what perhaps you're planning on doing. So although those confidential documents don't represent IP, I believe that they need to have the same level of care and protection because it can threaten your competitive position if they leak out.
Right. So really, it's not only just a legalese type of term, but it's also kind of putting your competitive advantage inventory list of items, like you said, those best practices, customer lists, core strategies, or who knows, maybe even financial modeling that you've come up with that are confidential. So
right.
It seems like the definition is pretty broad.
Yeah, it's pretty broad in my view. But I guess the reason to be wary of that is there are incidences of hacking, left and right. And there was an incident in the UN in Geneva where they found out that the Chinese had hacked in and had been monitoring the UN's emails and all their activities in the Geneva office for 3 or 4 years. So you could have an intrusion or a breach and not be aware of it. It could be going on right now, and you could not be aware of it because there are certain techniques that hackers can use to cover their tracks. So you really need to focus on protecting that intellectual property directly, that confidential information directly, so that even if it does get access, they're not able to actually read it and view it. And I'll give you some examples of some technologies that can do that.
Great, yeah, I think our listeners would love it. And also, just to kind of switch gears, about the new 2013 COSO Framework, we've now seen a more comprehensive view of corporate governance impacting outside service providers. Can you share with our listeners some key best practice solutions of how to successfully outsource the management and monitoring of their intellectual property?
Yes, my recommendations would be similar to when you select a cloud provider or outsourcing most anything IT related. So you're going to want to ask questions like, is this outsourcing company, is this provider, do they subcontract? Or are they allowed in your contract to subcontract? And are those subcontractors, what sort of scrutiny are they under? Are they obligated to comply under U.S. laws? For instance, one firm outsourced the management of their electronic medical records to a company in India, unbeknownst to the original company, the original hospital. And later, the employees of that company decided they had something that they could reveal to the public and was worth something. So they demanded to be paid much more, or they would reveal all these medical records publicly, which would be, in our country, an egregious violation of HIPAA and healthcare privacy laws, but they're not bound by that. And there was no way to stop this because the subcontracting was done without the hospital knowing originally. So you need to know, can they subcontract? This is a contractual issue up front, but can they subcontract? And then how are those subcontractors scrutinized? That's one key thing. Another key thing, if you're outsourcing the handling of your IP, and this could also mean just shipping blueprints or designs to China for use, but you still want to protect them after that. Well, what is that company's employee screening process? Are the employees bonded? Or do they sign confidentiality agreements? And are they U.S.-based and subject to U.S. laws? That's another question to ask. Who's going to be touching and handling my IP? Another question to ask is, do they handle the IP of perhaps any of your close competitors? And if you're a bank and there's a bank across the street, are you both customers of the same outsourcing firm? What safeguards are in place to ensure that your IP cannot be hacked by that competitive firm or insiders? So what measures are in place? Do we have a dedicated server, for instance? Or are they using virtual machines where perhaps our data could be sitting next to our competitors' data and they have access to it, and perhaps through a back door they could access it? So you need to ask those kinds of questions. Where is the IP going to physically reside, and what security measures are in place? Another thing I would recommend is what are their security audit processes? Are IT security standards being employed? There are standards like ISO 27001, that series through 27001, I believe, which is an IT security standard. Or are they using ISO 38500 or IT governance frameworks like COBIT or ITIL? So what sort of standards and best practices are they using in their shop? And are they using best practices, for instance, in database security? And then what technology is being used? So are they encrypting your databases? Are they masking the databases? Do they encrypt communications to you? Or do they use technology that I'd like to introduce that most people don't really know about, called information rights management? You're familiar with probably digital rights management, which is protecting the ability to copy with music or videos, and that's sort of in the retail marketplace. But in the enterprise marketplace, information rights management means protecting any kind of confidential documents or any kind of IP. So information rights management is software that can, upon creation of a document, can secure that document, and you assign the rights at that time, the right to view, the right to print, the right to edit. That type of thing. And even the right to forward that document. Or there's contextual information rights management software now. Some of this development's coming out of the military applications out of Tel Aviv, and contextually they've developed the ability to, maybe you are allowed to print your reports in your accounting department, but someone from human resources or from purchasing can view the reports, but they can't print them. So it's contextual. Or maybe you can view them from your desktop, but not from your laptop. Or maybe you can view them during the business day, but not after hours, that type of thing.
Right.
So it controls all of the access to these information rights, even after that IP leaves the company. So in the example of you have an employee that might have all of your trade secrets and IP on their laptop, as soon as they're terminated or they quit, you can switch off the access to those documents, and they're lying there encrypted. So if they try to open them the next time, it has to go to the cloud or to a server to get authority to open those documents. So you have instantly turned off access to those encrypted documents upon termination, so you can still have control of documents once they leave the organization using information rights management technology. We can talk about that a little bit more. But other questions I would ask is, are they using the cloud? Is this outsourcing provider that's managing your IP going to use the cloud? Cloud's very popular. It's very economical. They may be using it. They probably are. What kind of measures are they using in terms of security? And I guess one more would be the backup and disaster recovery plans, and have those been tested. I lived in New Orleans for 25 years, and I was in the midst of Hurricane Katrina. In fact, that's what I wrote my first book about, was my Hurricane Katrina experience. And there was an internet company downtown that had tested their disaster recovery plan. They had a generator in the basement that they'd actually run on their entire data center for a week. And this was just what they did every year. Well, when Hurricane Katrina hit, they were the only ones that were up, and they were still servicing their customers, and they were still keeping hospitals going. With information systems. So they tested their plan, and the biggest problem they had was after a week there just wasn't any fuel coming into town. So they were over the radio and any other way trying to ask people to bring in diesel fuel to keep their generator running, because they were keeping the information systems of some hospitals running at the time. So all of those kinds of things need to be considered when you're outsourcing your intellectual property.